Hi everyone, my name is Raina Verissimo. I'm a senior product designer here at GitLab working with the release team. And today I'm going to walk you through the rescoring of the UX scorecard for create a release and update it. The UX scorecard is a way for designers to take an holistic approach to improving experience and fixing usability challenges in our product. We pretty much follow three main steps. The first one being identifying the user and their desired outcome. And to do that, we define a persona and a job to be done together with our product managers. We map the user journey, their activities, desires, and pain points during their journey. And finally, using what we learned, we grade the experience, establishing a baseline rating. We later on implement improvements based on these recommendations. For the job to be done, we are working with multiple personas that share common responsibilities and steps in a diverse workflow. Our main persona is the release manager or the software DevOps engineer that is responsible for releases within an organization. Anyone involved in executing releases is considered, from automation engineers, QAs, users of a project who aren't necessarily part of the core team, and external people who use a project's code or binary and just want to be aware of when a new version comes out. The job to be done with rescoring is when tracking important deliverables in my project, I want to easily create and manage release entries in GitLab so I can provide a package software, notes, and files for people to use. The benchmark score this experience received in 2019 Q2 was an F. The first experience did not allow for users to create or update release using the UI. They could only do that using the API. Based on the heuristic evaluation, I focus on the most painful areas of the workflow. These areas involve creating a release using the interface, making a clear differentiation between tags and releases, making releases easier to find, associating important data to it, such as milestones and issues, and general beautification of the workflow pages. I propose a series of recommendations that, once implemented, will help us improve the benchmark score. We had a total of 7 issues implemented from these. The first step that is for rescoring the user experience was to conduct 3 user interviews with both internal and external customers responsible for release management and release orchestration, as this provides valuable insights and removes subjectivity. Our intention was to validate our hypothesis. One of those hypotheses was that the small solutions proposed at the recommendations part of the experience baseline effort do affect the experience in a positive way. We all wanted to learn from different personas and understand how they are creating releases with GitLab. We also wanted to identify any roadblocks users encounter when creating and updating a release using the UI, as well as identifying what other UI and UX improvements are needed to support users when creating and updating releases. I mapped out the current workflow here, and I will walk you through the experience as is in a test project. I used the same test project during the user interviews, so you're going to see a lot of insights already published there. So in this test project, the first thing I want to do when working with releases is figuring out how I can create a new one. I can see that there is already some code and merge requests and issues open, so there are people working on this project. One of the improvements we did was to add the option to go to releases right here on the project overview page. During the user interviews, none of the 3 users spotted this new option. They mainly used the releases menu here on the side navigation to go to the releases. Clicking on it will take me to the releases page, and here I can see all the releases items created. I can see different people created it at different times, and I can also see the title. This is a commit tag, the tag, which has the same name as title, when it was released and by whom. Some users during the interviews mentioned that it would be interesting to hear to not only see the avatar, but also the full handle of the user so they can quickly identify who is responsible for this release. Another improvement we did here was to add the evidence collection. Users were a bit confused with Where is this coming from? And what does this mean? How can I update it? How can I change the name of it? We still cannot do that from the UI, but these improvements are planned. Users are able to copy the commit SHA and click here to see the whole commit. Here we see some improvements in the overall UI. There are differences from the previous version, but they're not very big. I still cannot create a release from this page, and that's a big pain point. It's not very intuitive, and the application UI is not giving me any hints on where I have to go to do that. Usually at GitLab we see a button here, green or blue button that allow users to create new items, which is not the case for releases. This button also does not help, and yeah, I cannot do anything from here other than seeing the releases or editing an item. This is a new functionality. Editing a release was added a couple of milestones ago, and users are pretty happy with it. They could really spot this very easily, and it's very intuitive that clicking on it will take them to the edit version of the release. When trying to edit a release item, users can only update the title and release notes. They can, of course, drag and drop some information here, such as assets, and add links to the download different assets that are external. So they're fairly happy with this page. They cannot, though, associate any data such as milestones or set a date and date for a release or mark a release as upcoming. Those are all the things that we can do through the API, but not through the user interface, which, yeah, can be pretty frustrating. When editing a release, it becomes highlighted and the page scrolls to the latest item, which is pretty cool. This is also new, was implemented a few milestones back. Yeah, and still, I cannot create a release. I know that if I go to the tags page, I can create a new tag and associate release notes to it. This page in particular is not very attractive. It looks pretty messy, and there are some feedback saying that we should improve the overall look and feel of this page. Again, no hints telling me where to go or how to create tags and how those are associated with releases. We do, though, added this option here that shows that this tag is a release tag, and clicking here you can see will take me back to the release page, and I'll see my release item. Going back to the tags page, I will create a new tag, and I'll give this a name. I can choose where I want to create from. I can choose from this release branch. I can add a message and release notes. Message and release notes are pretty confusing. We also receive a lot of feedback from users saying that they don't necessarily want to add a message to their tag, and because we are showing this field as a text area, it's confusing. One of the users say that he often has to come back and edit the release notes because he added a description on the messages field. So users indicated that it would be best if this section would either be hidden or transform into an input text instead of a text area. So here I can adding notes to my new release item. This is a test, so the data here doesn't really matter. And I'm gonna add some issues, and it should be good to go. When I create this tag, I expect that I'm going to be taken to view of my release page, and this doesn't really happen. This seems to be the detailed view of a tag, and these will be the release notes. There is no way from here to go to the release page. I can do edit, browse files, commits, or just download. That means I have to go back to the main menu, go to releases, and look at my release. If I try to edit my release notes from the tags view, what happens is that the form is different. I no longer can see the tag name, and I can no longer see the release title. This is very confusing. By canceling it and going back to releases, I can now see my new item. And yeah, the evidence collection is here, but as I said, I'm not sure where is this coming from. I didn't really create it, and I don't have an option to change the name or add a different data to it. Users mentioned that they would like to see issues in milestone related to this release. This is possible through the API, and in the meantime, this is everything that users can see and do. We also asked users to subscribe to notifications within the release, and they expected to see the notifications option on this page. They can, though, on the project overview, subscribe for releases. We added this option as well with our improvements, but as you can see, it's really hidden. You have to go to the drop down and then the model. Users mentioned that it will be interesting to have an option here to subscribe to releases and also on the releases overview page. All in all, we made a lot of improvements to the release functionality, but the workflow is very incomplete and leaves a lot of gaps. So the conclusion is that not all tasks can be completed. When users are trying to create or edit a release using the GitLab UI's interface, there's still a lot of friction. Some of the steps they need to do through the API, and some they have to do through the UI. Tags and releases are still confusing for users that are not familiar with their concept. And there are no signifiers, so very little support in the UI that links to relevant information. That makes users waste time. You can see all the collected conclusions and insights on this issue. And here we go over the main items that we wanted to discuss with users and also the findings from these heuristic evaluations. So we validate if users can find where to go to create a release, how they work with associating milestones, how they use pagination, and how they go about to edit a release, to stay informed through notifications, as well as documentation for releases. These are the insights that contributed to the score of this new step of the scorecard for creating a release and updating it. The experience grade stays as is. It's still an F. There's a very high chance of frustration, and the tasks cannot be completed to its fullest. There are steps missing, and there's a high risk of abandonment. Users will mostly like to seek other methods to complete the task. Thank you for watching. Yes.